Lesson 3-1 is solve two-step equations in the form px plus q is equal to r. Okay? Now, on your notes it says a two-step equation such as 5x plus 3 equals 13 has two operations paired with the variable. So here, you guys, those operations, of course, one is obvious, addition, right? And the other one is multiplication. Now, to solve a two-step equation, we want to use the properties of equality to undo the operations in reverse order. So, the properties of equality are the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division properties of equality. Now, you should know that those properties of equality mean that if you add on one side, then you have to add on the other side. If you multiply on one side, you have to multiply on the other side, and that goes with all the other operations. Okay, so when you perform each of the operations to each side of an equation with the same number, the two sides of the equation remain equal. That is what the properties of equality mean. Now, when we use these properties, we are using inverse operations to isolate our variable. Okay? So example 1, make sure you write this down. Negative 3x plus 5 is equal to 14. Now, we are going to use inverse operations and our properties of equality to isolate our variable. Now, I'm going to share with you a method that I've been using for a while, and it's called the cover-up method. Okay? I'm gonna scribble it out on the screen, but you're just gonna put your finger on it. Okay? So you're going to put your finger on the term that includes the variable that you're solving for. So here we're solving for x. So we want to put your finger on the entire term, cover it up. Is everybody with me? All right. Now, I'm going to draw this line here. Now, we want that blue dot on the left-hand side of that green line by itself. Is everybody with me? What do I need to get rid of in order to make that happen? The 5. Very good. Now, because that is a positive 5, how do I get rid of it? I subtract. So we're going to subtract 5 on both sides. Is everybody with me? So here, those 5s cancel to 0. And now we're left with negative 3x is equal to 14 minus 5 is 9. Good. Now, put your finger on the variable that you're solving for. You're solving for x. What do you want to get rid of? You want the dot by itself. What do you want to get rid of? The negative 3. Is everybody clear? So that means because this says negative 3 times x, how do I get rid of that negative 3? What's the inverse of times? Divide. We're using inverse operations. So we're going to divide by negative 3 on both sides. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. And 1 times x, what's anything times 1? Itself, right? So 1 times x is x. And then on the other side, we have 9 divided by negative 3, which is negative 3. Why don't you take a minute to do this one with your table partners. We've got negative 5 is equal to 4 plus 3x. All right, so we are going, when we do this, we're going to cover up the entire 3x and the operation that precedes it. So here we're going to cover that up, so we want to get rid of the 4. because that is a positive 4, we want to subtract 4. Is everybody clear? All right. So then we end up with 3x over here and a negative 9 over here. Now, we're going to cover up the x. So that means we want to get rid of the 3. Now, because that says 3 times x, we're going to divide by 3 on both sides. So those 3's cancel to 1. 1 times x is x. And negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. All right, example 2 is still solving two-step equations, but this one is with fractions. Now, you guys, it is okay. You can still follow the same process with fractions, but I'm going to show you a trick, okay? I'm going to show you a trick. Now, in this trick, we want to get rid of the fractions first, okay? Now, write this down. The way you're going to get rid of the fractions is that you're going to multiply by the denominator. You're going to multiply each term times the denominator of the fraction. So here, that means we're going to multiply this times 8, we're going to multiply this times 8, and we're going to multiply the first term by 8. So when we do this, 8 times negative 2 is negative 16, so this is going to be negative 16y. Now watch what happens here. Then 8 on the top, 8 on the bottom, those cancel to 1, right? 1 times 5 is 5, so minus 5. See, no fraction. And then over here, 8 on the top, 8 on the bottom, those cancel to 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. So this is equal to 3. And now I have no fractions. Is everybody clear? So now we're going to use our cover-up. So I'm going to cover up the term that includes my variable, the entire term, right? Don't forget to put your green line there, okay? Now, I want that dot on the left-hand side of that green line by itself. What do I need to get rid of? The 5. And that 5 is a negative 5, so how do I get rid of it? We're going to add 5. Very good. So plus 5 here, plus 5 there. So here, we've got those 5s, those cancel to 0, so we're left with negative 16y over there equals 8. Now, we're going to cover up the y, we'll cover up our term, which means we want to get rid of what? Negative 16. So, pay attention. Because this says negative 16 times y, what's the inverse operation? Division. So what are we going to divide by? Negative 16. Good. Because that's what we want to get rid of. Is everybody clear? So, here, negative 16 divided by negative 16, that simplifies to 1. And 1 times y is y. And then this, 8 over negative 16, that simplifies to negative 1/2. You guys take a minute to do this one with your table partners, okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little hint on this one. What should I do first with those mixed numbers? Not whole numbers, improper fractions. Very good. So do those, change those into improper fractions, and then do the getting rid of the fraction method, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to change the mixed numbers to improper fractions. So we've got a negative 17/2 here, and we've got a negative 7/2 there. Then I decided to get rid of my fractions by multiplying each term by the denominator. So here, this is going to be 10w. This is going to be a negative 17, because those 2's cancel, equals a negative 7, because those 2's cancel. So now I'm going to use my cover-up. So here, I'm going to cover up the 10w, which means I want to get rid of the negative 17. So I'm going to add 17 on both sides to get rid of that 17. So that 17, that simplifies to 0, and we end up with 10w is equal to negative 7 plus 17, that gives me 10. Then I'm going to cover up my w. That means I want to get rid of the 10. So 10 times w, so we divide by 10 on both sides. So those cancel, the 10s cancel to 1, and w is equal to 1. So example 3 has decimals in here. Now, I would teach you a trick on how to get rid of the decimals, but since we're allowed to use our calculators, you can just use a calculator, but you still have to show your way, okay? So, we're just going to use the cover-up method, okay? So here we have negative 5.7 is equal to negative 6x minus 8.1. So here, we're going to cover up the negative 6x, okay? Let me draw this dotted green line again. I like putting the dotted green line there just so I know where the equal sign is and when I can say, oh, this side or that side. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So I want that blue dot by itself on the right-hand side. So what do I want to get rid of? The negative 8.1. So how do I get rid of a negative 8.1? You add 8.1. Very good. So we're going to add 8.1 over here, and we're going to add 8.1 over there. Okay? So here, those 8.1s, those cancel to 0, and we're left with a negative 6x is equal to, and what is negative 5.7 plus 8.1? 2.4. That's going to be a 2.4. Remember, you guys, you subtract the digits and take the sign of the bigger digit. Okay? Now, pay attention. I'm going to cover up the x. You guys put your finger on it. Put your finger on the x. What do you want to get rid of to get the blue dot by itself? The negative 6. So this says, pay attention, negative 6 times x. What's the inverse of times? Division. So we're going to divide, but what are we going to divide by? Negative 6. Very good. So those negative 6's simplify to 1, and 1 times x is x. And now we just divide 2.4 divided by negative 6. What are you going to get? Very good. So this is going to give us a negative 0.4. Why don't you guys take a minute to do this one with your table partners? All right, we have negative 5 plus 0.3x is equal to 7.9. So on this, when we use our cover-up, we're going to cover up this whole thing, including that plus, right? And that x. Cover the whole thing. Now, we want, on this side, let me just go like this. Okay, so we want that blue dot by itself, so that means we want to get rid of the negative 5. In order to get rid of the negative 5, we're going to add 5 on both sides, right? So those 5s cancel to 0, and then we end up with 0.3 times x is equal to 12.9. Has everybody got that? So then here, we're going to cover up the x, which means that we want to get rid of the 0.3. Now that says 0.3 times x, right? So if it's times x, the inverse is division. So we're going to divide by 0.3 on both sides, and x is equal to 43. All right, so before we do example 4, we want to look at this little bit of vocabulary. It says two numbers with a product of 1 are called reciprocals. You guys remember that word? Reciprocals? Another name for that is the multiplicative inverse. Okay, the multiplicative inverse. You need to know both of those words. Okay? Now, reciprocals, when we're looking at reciprocals, for example, if I had, I'm going to say, let's say 3/5. The reciprocal of that is 5/5. 5/3, right? 5/3. It says here if the product is equal to 1, so let's see, product, that means multiply, right? So this is going to be 15 over 15, that's equal to 1. If the product is equal to 1, then those two fractions are reciprocals. Is everybody clear with that? Now, the inverse property of multiplication can be used to solve equations using rational number coefficients. Now, rational number coefficients, that just means that the coefficient or the number in front of the variable is a fraction. Is everybody with me? So, the inverse property of multiplication says that if I multiply by the reciprocal on one side, I have to multiply by the reciprocal on the other side. You got that? So it's just like those properties of equality, okay? Now, we are going to solve two-step equations with rational number coefficients. Now, we want the number in front of the variable to be 1, okay? So, here we have -2 plus 2/3 w is equal to 10. Now, we are going to use our cover-up method, okay? So we're going to cover up, we want to solve for w, so we're going to cover up the term that includes the w. And don't forget its sign, okay? So here is my dotted line. So if I want that blue dot by itself on the left-hand side, what do I want to get rid of? The -2. So how do I get rid of the -2? You add 2. Very good. So we are going to add 2 on both sides. So here, -2 plus 2, that cancels to 0. And we're left with 2/3 w is equal to 12. Now, we want the number in front of the variable to be 1. So what am I going to multiply 2/3 times to make it equal to 1? 3 over 2. 3/2. That's how we say that. 3/2. So we're going to multiply times 3/2 here. And if I multiply on one side by the reciprocal, you multiply on the other. So times 3/2 there. I'm going to put this over 1 just so you can see it. So now, this is 6 over 6. That's equal to 1, right? So this all simplifies to 1. So 1 times w is w. And now my variable is by itself. Now on the other side, we can simplify before we multiply, right? So 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. And now we can multiply. 6 times 3 is 18. All right, so we have a -16x minus 3 is equal to 2. So here we have, we're going to cover up that -16x. That's what we're solving for. That means we want to get rid of that -3. So that means we're going to add 3 on both sides. So once we do that, this cancels to 0. So we end up with -16x is equal to 5. Now, this, you guys, is what we want the reciprocal. We want this to be equal to 1. So the reciprocal of -16 is -6 over 1. Is everybody with me? So you're just going to multiply times -6 on both sides. So here, this cancels to 1, and 1 times x is x. And then +5 times -6 gives us -30.